Hi, this is Michael Kay, and welcome to Built Not Discovered. Now, a while back, I threw a party at my house in London, and one of the guests was Nick Shymansky. Now, Nick is one of the most respected figures in the music industry, and he was Amy Winehouse's manager through the seminal parts of her career. Now, at some point during the evening, Nick brought up a memory. It was a specific afternoon in a small flat in Stratford, East London. And it was the advice I gave him that day about a 16-year-old girl that he'd brought to sing for me. Now, I remembered it immediately because you don't forget a voice like that. But to understand how that afternoon came about, you need to understand the world around it. Now, at that time, I was being managed by Danny D and Tim Blacksmith. Now, they were serious players in the industry, and they were building something real. They had me working on projects, and they also managed a production duo that you may have heard of, Stargate. The same Stargate who would go on to produce #1 records for Rihanna, Beyonce, Neo, and Katy Perry, among many others. Now, we were all in the same orbit, different planets, but the same sky. And Nick was the intern, young, sharp, 19 years old, and figuring out his place in the world. Now, he was working for Danny and Tim when I first knew him, learning the business from the inside out, where you can only do when you're in the room rather than just reading about it. And then there was Tyler. Now, Tyler was a young singer that we were developing, an exceptional vocalist and genuinely remarkable. We spent a lot of time on his project, real time, real belief. And whenever Tyler would come to the studio or Nick would come by, it was always the same thing. Amy, Amy, Amy. Tyler kept going on about this girl. She was his best friend. They'd met at Sylvia Young's theatre school in London. One of those places that has a good strike rate in producing people who are always going to end up somewhere remarkable. And Tyler couldn't stop talking about her voice, her talent, what she had. And eventually he got to Nick. And Nick went to listen to her, loved what he heard, and signed on as her manager. And then he brought her to my flat in Stratford. Now, I need to paint you a picture of that flat. It was small. Just a one-bedroom place in East London that I still own to this day. It wasn't a studio. It wasn't a professional space. It's just a room where music happened because that's what the people in it did. And Nick arrived with Amy. She was 16, polite, quietly confident in the way that people who are genuinely talented sometimes are. She wasn't showy, not performing before the performance. She just introduced herself. And then, without any fuss or ceremony, she looked around the room, kicked off her shoes, and sat down on the floor. Not on the sofa, not on a chair, and there were chairs everywhere, on the carpet. Now, I've thought about that moment many times since. At the time, it struck me as very unusual. But looking back, I believe she was nervous, genuinely nervous, and she needed to feel grounded before she could open up, literally. She needed the floor under her before she could give everything above it. And then she sang. Now, I'm not going to try to describe it too precisely because some things resist description. But what I can tell you is that she was completely herself. She was soulful. She was jazzy and she was expressive. She had a voice that had already found its own character at 16 in a way that most singers spend their whole careers searching for. It was unique and it was confident and it was completely unmistakably her. Afterwards, away from Amy, Nick and I talked about her direction. But something was nagging at me because what they were thinking about doing with her, the musical direction that they had and that they were considering, was this very avant-garde, left-of-field approach. Kind of obscure songs, jazz standards, and it felt to me deliberately uncommercial. The idea being that her uniqueness needed an equally unique frame around it. I understood the instinct, but I disagreed with it completely. You see, my whole philosophy, the thing I'd built my career around, was the great song. Just that, the Motown principle. The melody that the postman whistles walking down the street. I always believe that the most sophisticated thing you can do as a producer or songwriter is to make something that connects with everyone without talking down to anyone. A great pop song is harder to write than people think, and it's the most powerful vehicle that an artist can have. Amy didn't need to be shaped into anything. She was already different. She was already the real deal. What she needed wasn't a concept or a frame. She just needed great songs that could carry what she already had. And I told Nick that. Just give her great material. Trust what's already there. Don't complicate it. Now, her first album, Frank, came out in 2003, and it did reasonably well at the time. And looking back, it's been critically acclaimed. There's real beauty in it, but it was doing something similar to what I'd heard. It was framing her in a jazz and soul context that was more niche than I felt her talent deserved. And then came Back to Black. Mark Ronson. Just great songs, crafted production, and Amy completely unleashed within it. 10 million albums, one of the most celebrated records of the 21st century. And every time I heard it, I thought, yeah, that's it. That's what was always there in that room in Stratford, sitting on the floor with his shoes off. It just needed the right songs around it. Now, Nick mentioned it at my party that he still remembers the time and our conversation that day. And it had really stayed with him. And I don't say that to take any credit for what Amy became. She was always going to become something extraordinary, with or without any advice from anyone. That voice was going somewhere regardless. But it meant something to hear that the conversation had mattered. That being in the right room at the right time, saying the right thing, can leave a mark even when you don't know it at the time. Now, Tyler was there throughout her whole life. He was her best friend to the end. He never got the record deal he deserved. And believe me, he deserved one. The industry kept asking, why would we sign a white British R&B singer? And then 6 months later, Justin Timberlake arrived and answered that question definitively. But that's the music business. Timing is everything. And sometimes the timing just doesn't cooperate. What I know is that without Tyler, there is no Nick finding Amy. And without that afternoon in a small flat in Stratford, some things might have been different. When Nick finished his time with Danny and Tim, he went on to work for Simon Fuller at 19 Management, one of the most powerful management companies in the world. And Amy was his first client. His first real job, his first act. And I remember meeting him for lunches around that time. This young guy suddenly with a proper expense account, full of energy about what he was building with her. Nick was at the center of Amy's story in ways that go far beyond management. He fought for her. He tried desperately to get her into treatment, to pull her back from what was coming. And Amy and being the artist, wrote a song about it. You probably know it, Rehab, one of the most iconic songs of her generation. He believed in her completely. He always did. And that's how it works. Not one big discovery, a chain of moments, each one connected to the last. Built, not discovered. Now, next episode, I want to go somewhere different, away from the stories you might expect, because Built, Not Discovered isn't just about the artists that I've worked with. It's about the principles behind every career that ever meant something. I'll see you Thursday.